Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Thanks for clicking on to the Wednesday edition of Vulcan's European Outlook for the 14th of February. And certainly the weather at the moment is not the kind of weather conducive for snuggling up to your partner this evening, because we do have mild conditions running northwards, and that mild theme is going to persist for the next wee while at least. This is the upcoming GFS 5-day temperature anomaly chart for Europe, and you see a bit of a blowtorch across the majority of the continent, including southern Scandinavia, if you notice here. But yeah, very interesting skies across the far north of the UK. This was a capture by our friend Lisa Pattenden of the Aurora Borealis over Loch Fleet late last night. Do have to have a good camera to capture this, I must say, because I was driving up the A9 and I didn't see any aurora, and she was saying that really with the naked eye, and especially with the light pollution from headlights, etc., you're not going to see anything really. But a stunning view and capture nonetheless by Lisa. Thanks for sharing that on Twitter. And she has most recently joined the Marvel Weather moderation team here on YouTube as well. So a big thank you once again to her for that. But we have got the major southern stratospheric warming situation looking highly likely. I think that's the big story, to be honest with you, at the moment, because the weather, in terms of a wintry sense anyway, is not looking particularly great at the moment, I must admit. But one thing I will say is this, that I feel at least optimistic that, given the fact that there's a very high likelihood that we are going to see a second major southern stratospheric warming of the winter. The last time I believe that happened was 0910. And at the very, very least, it gives us some sort of promise that we still have a shot at seeing wintry weather as we move towards the latter half of February, and more so probably into the month of March. Remember, once this major SSW, if it happens, because it's not actually yet happened, so we don't want to say it's a guarantee just yet, but you can see here, this is the ECMWF spread in the models, and pretty much all members, more or less all members now, take it below the zero line, which means that the mean zone of winds are at the moment the very strong deceleration, which means that we're seeing very strong warming taking place. That's actually taking place off Siberia, off Eurasia, right the way across the top of the pole, and it is going to force the mean zone of winds that spin around the polar vortex. The stronger those winds, the stronger the polar vortex. The weaker those winds, the weaker the polar vortex. And when they reverse, you've essentially got a wave break situation taking place, where almost the waves are so much that it actually then forces the winds to then reverse back on themselves. And it's a bit of a crude explanation as to what a major SSW is. There is plenty of material out there that gives you a lot more in-depth reasoning behind it. Now, I did see a couple of sources saying the reason behind why we're seeing the major southern stratospheric warming, if we do see it. I have to keep emphasizing that word if. I feel as if I've been doing that a lot recently. It's amazing how December and January plays out really well, and then all of a sudden the weather shows that really it is in control. No matter how much you use the MJO, the past strat warmings that we've seen during the winter season, it just shows you that the system is so complex that you cannot, rule or ride on one or two or even three particular teleconnections. It only takes one other element to be thrown into the mix that perhaps isn't favourable to then throw things out the window. But it looks as if this strong phase 6, phase 7 of the MJO, strong mountain torque, which means that you're actually propagating heat energy out of the troposphere up into the lower stratosphere. And that could be some of the reasoning behind this major SSW. Now, there is a 70% chance, going by statistics and going by the past, there's a 70% chance that this could constitute a cold pattern, which would be into the month of March. by the way, because it doesn't look as if we're going to turn cold anytime soon. I don't think, based on the overall situation we've got at the moment. But we've got a 70% chance that we have got colder weather across the UK and Ireland. Really, essentially, a weakened or reversed mean zone of wind means that we slow down the westerlies, the jet stream, and therefore we have an increased chance of seeing blocking developing within the mid to high latitude pattern. But it all depends on where those blocks set up. You could have a block that sets up right overhead, and therefore you actually see cold, like we've seen in the winter of 2011, 2012. The cold actually went into Europe as opposed to really into the UK. We only had a short spell where the cold actually hit the UK here, and it was actually more England as opposed to Scotland. Scotland tended to be milder that winter as opposed to further south. But certainly the upcoming 7-day period, as you can see here, is a bit of a blowtorch, and I've given my reasons in yesterday's video why that's the case. We've got areas of low pressure moving off North America here, deep cold going to start to drop south over the continent here, and we're then forcing the deepening of the trough over the western Atlantic. Then we'll pump the ridge over the eastern side of the Atlantic, and we're driving warmer out of Africa all the way up into the UK and Ireland. We could see conceivably 17 Celsius over the next couple of days here. Even the day 4 through 8, you can see here it's warmer than average, which takes us to the 22nd of February here. But this is incidentally the month of March, according to the CFSV2, which is quite an interesting one. You can see here the block over Greenland and over the Arctic region. That is a negative Arctic oscillation and North Atlantic oscillation pattern for the month of March. And this may be in response to the likely sudden stratospheric warming that we're going to see over the next few days here. You can see the trough over the UK, Ireland, into France here in particular. But one has to take into consideration here, we've got a little bit of an extension back in the blue, representing below average heights versus the orangey red colors, which is above average heights. You've got a little bit of an extension back out into the Atlantic, so therefore we have to take into consideration, where does that block actually set up if it happens. Where does that block actually set up? Because if it's further west towards, say, North America, you tend to have more Atlantic influence over the UK and Ireland here. If it's a little bit further east, you tend to have a little bit of a weaker jet over the eastern side of the Atlantic. So it's all to play for when it comes to the positioning of where that block sets up. Let's have a look at the 2-meter temperature anomalies here out of interest, because I've not actually looked at it. And it shows average to below average, which is quite interesting. Look at how warm Canada is, but we do have colder than average across the central and southern US. This is the Europe view here. So yeah, interesting actually to see that it's average to below average temperature-wise. Colder than average across Scandinavia, if you notice here, colder than average across central and western France also, which is quite interesting. But like I say, it really is all to play for when it comes forward. But like I say, I'm not just clutching the straws here and just praying that cold's going to come because I said it would come. But it'll be interesting nonetheless to see whether we get any response in a cold way from this likely major sudden stratospheric warming. Now remember what happened around this time last year. We had a major sudden stratospheric warming that actually took place during the middle portion of February in 2023, and we actually did see a particularly cold spell for a short period of time in the month of March, where I think the coldest temperatures was up in Altahara. I'm pretty sure it hit minus 16, if my memory serves me correctly, and there was quite an impressive spell of cold. And that was in response to that major SSW that occurred during the middle portions of February. Now, we know the beast from the east kind of scenario, and I don't want to make that comparison because that was somewhat of a unique event. March 2013 was the second coldest March on record. These events actually did follow major sudden stratospheric warmings, but you have to get everything coming together just perfectly to deliver that type of event, whether it be March 2013, February 2021, or the beast from the east, end of February, beginning of March 2018. So, like I say, this isn't hyping things up. This is showing you what is happening, etc., etc. And this is interesting. This is the GFS ensemble here for the Arctic Oscillation. You can see here that we're firmly negative at the moment, despite the fact that look at how warm it is. Just shows you Arctic Oscillation is negative here, and it's expected to go back positive, which is rather interesting. And that would take us to the second half. So do we see this negative back to positive and then back to negative? That'll be the interesting question, actually. Let's have a look at the North Atlantic Oscillation here and see if we can see anything showing up here in the model. So you can see it did very briefly go negative, but you can really say neutral into positive, where it's expected to go over the next week or so, and then it's expected to go back towards neutral once again. You want to see the Arctic Oscillation and North Atlantic Oscillation going into the tank in order to see a proper response. But only time will tell with regards to the overall cold pattern. Let's have a quick look at the ECMWF, and this is the weeklies here. So this is the upcoming 7-day period. And this is the mean zonal, not mean zonal winds, mean sea level pressure over the next 7 days. You notice here the deep negative here extending from North America into the Northwest Atlantic. And this is what's driving the warm pattern. Once you push that atmosphere downwards in a trough fashion over the Northwest Atlantic, over the western side of the Atlantic Ocean, what you're doing is you're actually then forcing the atmosphere to lift on the eastern side of the Atlantic. And what you're doing is you're picking up warm flow with those southwesterly winds. Remember those winds coming right the way down the base of the trough into the subtropical Atlantic, round the base, and of course you've got a high pressure situation over southwestern Europe. So where's the winds coming from? It's between the two systems, between the trough and the ridge. You've got that airflow coming up from the southwest, but you're also raising the heights. As you've got a nice deep trough over the western Atlantic, you've got a nice ridge of high pressure, stronger ridge over the eastern Atlantic. So you've got both southwesterly transport of mild subtropical air, but you've also got a nice sinking column over southwestern Europe, which is going to enhance any warming take place. So over the next few days, we are going to see the continuation of mild weather. Now, as we play through this ECM weeklies here, you notice here that we start to see some subtle changes. We've got a bit more of an Atlantic influence starting to show up here in the period between the 7 to 14 day. You notice here that we've got more very, very low heights across much of North America. If you notice that the mean sea level pressure situation here, as we continue to play through this, watch what happens. We're deepening the negative over North America. We're also deepening the negative over the UK and Ireland here. We've got a bit of a higher pressure now starting to show up a little bit to the west of Iberia and up towards Greenland here. And that is some very significant changes taking place. And notice here that the trough then sinks out of Canada down into the heart of the United States. We're also holding on to that negative over the UK and Ireland, and this certainly would indicate a colder flavour to the weather as we progress towards the period. This would be the 27th of February through the 5th of March. Let's have a look at the temperature anomaly situation here, and for the same time frame, this is how the temperatures would look in terms of the anomaly. And yeah, colder than average, nothing exceptional. If we skip right the way back, you can see here we go from firmly warmer than average, bitterly colder over eastern and northeastern Europe here, if you notice, and then we start to turn colder. Nothing exceptional if you notice here, but it turns colder nonetheless. Looks as if as we look at the GFS over the next few days, we are going to continue to see systems coming in off the Atlantic. There's those deep lows exiting North America here. There's the strengthening of the high out of Northwest Africa up through Iberia into the southern UK, if you notice here, but we still have systems riding the flow to the northwest here, but we're going to maintain this mild flavour of weather up from the south here. So, like I say, plenty of things going on at the moment here. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I do greatly appreciate your support. And let's watch what happens when it comes to this SSW. Is it going to deliver something interesting? Is winter going to have a sting in its tail before we enter the spring? that remains to be seen. But stay tuned. Keep it right here on Marvel and Weather on YouTube, and I'll see you again tomorrow with more. Bye for now. Thanks for watching.